Did you know that several active faults lie beneath Las Vegas, each capable of producing a magnitude 7 earthquake? How does a city known for rapid expansion and engineered spectacle coexist with structures in the Earth's crust that have shifted repeatedly over thousands of years? And if the signs of past movement are still visible today, what does that suggest about the strain that may still be accumulating below the surface? Las Vegas is often perceived as a landscape defined by human design, yet beneath the roads, resorts, and neighborhoods lies a tectonic framework shaped by long-term geological processes. The region sits within the Basin and Range Province, an area characterized by crustal stretching that has been ongoing for millions of years. This stretching produces normal faults, where blocks of crust move vertically relative to one another. These structures are not relics of the distant past. Many remain active, with evidence of movement during the Quaternary period, meaning within the last 2.6 million years. Among the faults identified in and around Las Vegas, 3 stand out due to their proximity, structural characteristics, and documented activity: the Eglinton Fault, the California Wash Fault, and the Frenchman Mountain Fault. Each represents a different expression of the same tectonic regime, yet all share the capacity to generate significant seismic events under the right conditions. The Eglinton Fault runs through portions of North Las Vegas, though its presence is not immediately obvious due to extensive urban development. In certain areas, however, its scarp remains visible. A fault scarp is a step-like feature formed when the ground surface is displaced during an earthquake. In this case, the displacement reaches approximately 14 meters, or about 46 feet, indicating repeated movement over geological time. Such offsets are not produced by a single event, but by multiple episodes of rupture accumulating displacement incrementally. This fault has been assessed as capable of generating an earthquake with a magnitude of approximately 6.3. While this is below the threshold often associated with widespread catastrophic damage, the impact in a densely built urban environment would still be substantial. Ground shaking intensity depends not only on magnitude, but also on depth, distance from the epicenter, and local soil conditions. In Las Vegas, large areas are underlain by unconsolidated alluvial sediments, which can amplify seismic waves. This amplification increases the potential for structural damage even in events that are moderate by global standards. Moving northeast, the California Wash Fault presents a more visually accessible example of active tectonics. It is observable along the route toward the Valley of Fire, particularly near the base of the mountains along Interstate 15. The scarp here is more pronounced, cutting across the landscape in a way that clearly delineates past movement. This fault is classified as a normal fault, consistent with the extensional regime of the Basin and Range Province. The hanging wall has moved downward relative to the footwall, creating the visible topographic step. Historical and geological data indicate that the California Wash Fault has produced earthquakes averaging magnitude 6.9. This places it near the upper end of what is typically expected for faults of its size and type. Its classification as a quaternary fault confirms that it has been active in geologically recent time, and there is no indication that this activity has ceased. Instead, the fault continues to accommodate strain as the crust stretches, suggesting that future movement is not only possible but inevitable over long timescales. The structure of the California Wash Fault also provides insight into the mechanics of seismic hazard in the region. The fault zone represents a plane of weakness where stress accumulates until it exceeds the strength of the surrounding rock. When this threshold is reached, the stored energy is released suddenly in the form of an earthquake. The magnitude of such an event is influenced by the length of the fault segment that ruptures and the amount of displacement that occurs during the rupture. Given the observed characteristics of this fault, a large rupture could produce strong ground motion, affecting not only nearby areas but also the broader Las Vegas Valley. The Frenchman Mountain Fault is widely regarded as the most significant seismic threat to the Las Vegas area. Located near the eastern edge of the valley, it exhibits a complex geometry described as Listric, meaning the fault surface curves with depth. This curvature influences how stress is distributed along the fault and how rupture propagates during an earthquake. In addition to its normal fault component, the Frenchman Mountain Fault also displays strike-slip motion, where blocks of crust slide horizontally past each other. This combination of vertical and horizontal movement increases the complexity of potential seismic events. The scarp associated with this fault is clearly visible near the base of Frenchman Mountain, where darker rock layers are offset relative to adjacent formations. The presence of displaced alluvial deposits indicates that movement has occurred in relatively recent geological time. Models suggest that this fault is capable of generating an earthquake with a magnitude approaching 6.9, placing it in a similar range to the California Wash Fault, but with potentially greater impact due to its proximity to densely populated areas. If such an event were to occur, the epicenter would likely be close to the urban core of Las Vegas. This proximity would significantly increase the intensity of ground shaking experienced across the city. In seismic terms, intensity refers to the effects of an earthquake at a specific location, which can vary widely depending on local conditions. In areas with soft sediments, shaking can be amplified, leading to greater damage. This is particularly relevant in Las Vegas, where much of the valley floor consists of unconsolidated deposits derived from surrounding mountains. The broader tectonic context further underscores the potential for significant seismic activity. The Basin and Range Province is undergoing extension at a rate of several millimeters per year, equivalent to a fraction of an inch annually. While this rate may seem negligible on a human timescale, over thousands of years it results in substantial deformation. Faults accommodate this deformation episodically, releasing accumulated strain in discrete events rather than through continuous motion. This pattern leads to long periods of relative stability, punctuated by sudden, sometimes severe earthquakes. In addition to the primary faults, the region contains numerous smaller fault structures that contribute to the overall seismic hazard. These secondary faults may not produce large earthquakes individually, but they can influence how stress is distributed across the crust. In some cases, movement on one fault can trigger or influence activity on another, a phenomenon known as stress transfer. This interconnected behavior adds a layer of complexity to seismic risk assessment, as it is not sufficient to consider each fault in isolation. Urban development has further complicated the relationship between these geological features and the built environment. As Las Vegas has expanded, construction has taken place over and around fault traces that were once more clearly visible. In some cases, the surface expression of faults has been modified or obscured by grading, paving, and building. This does not eliminate the underlying structures, it simply makes them less apparent. The faults remain active beneath the surface, capable of movement, regardless of what has been constructed above them. Engineering practices in Las Vegas have incorporated seismic considerations, particularly in larger structures and critical infrastructure. Building codes are designed to ensure that structures can withstand a certain level of ground shaking without catastrophic failure. These codes are based on probabilistic assessments of seismic hazard, which estimate the likelihood of different levels of shaking occurring over specified time periods. While such measures reduce risk, they do not eliminate it entirely. The performance of buildings during an earthquake depends on a range of factors, including design, construction quality, and maintenance. Infrastructure systems such as roads, bridges, water supply, and power distribution are also vulnerable to seismic activity. Disruption to these systems can have cascading effects, even if structural damage to buildings is limited. For example, ground shaking can cause differential settlement in soils, leading to damage in pipelines and roadways. In areas with significant vertical displacement along a fault, surface rupture can directly offset infrastructure, creating additional challenges for response and recovery. Another factor influencing seismic risk in Las Vegas is the depth at which earthquakes occur. Shallow earthquakes, typically those occurring within the upper 10 kilometers or about 6 miles, tend to produce more intense ground shaking at the surface compared to deeper events. The faults in the Las Vegas area are capable of generating relatively shallow earthquakes, which increases their potential impact. The combination of shallow depth, proximity to urban areas, and soil conditions creates a scenario in which even moderate to strong earthquakes could have significant consequences. Historical seismicity in the region provides additional context. While Las Vegas has not experienced a recent large earthquake directly beneath the city, surrounding areas have recorded events that demonstrate the active nature of the regional fault system. These events serve as reminders that the tectonic processes shaping the basin and range province are ongoing. The absence of a recent major earthquake in a specific location does not indicate safety. In many cases, it reflects the accumulation of strain that has yet to be released. Geological investigations, including trenching studies and remote sensing, have been used to reconstruct the history of fault activity in the area. These studies reveal patterns of past earthquakes, including their approximate magnitudes and recurrence intervals. While such data provide valuable insights, they also highlight uncertainties. Earthquake recurrence is not perfectly periodic, and the timing of future events cannot be predicted with precision. Instead, scientists rely on probabilistic models to estimate the likelihood of different scenarios. The implications of a magnitude 7 earthquake in the Las Vegas region extend beyond the immediate rupture of a single fault and into the broader dynamics of how seismic waves propagate through the valley. When an earthquake of this scale occurs, energy radiates outward in the form of primary, secondary, and surface waves. Each type of wave interacts differently with the materials it encounters, and in a basin environment like Las Vegas, this interaction can significantly alter the intensity and duration of shaking. The valley itself acts as a structural depression filled with layers of sediment that have accumulated over tens of thousands of years, in some places reaching depths of more than 1 kilometer, or about 0.6 miles. These sediments are less consolidated than bedrock, meaning they respond to seismic energy by amplifying motion rather than dampening it. This amplification effect has been documented in similar geological settings around the world. When seismic waves enter a basin filled with softer materials, their velocity decreases while their amplitude increases. The result is stronger shaking at the surface compared to areas underlain by solid rock. In Las Vegas, this means that neighborhoods built on thick alluvial deposits could experience more intense ground motion than areas closer to exposed bedrock along the valley margins. The variation in shaking intensity across relatively short distances introduces a level of unpredictability in how different parts of the city would be affected during a major event. Ground motion is only one aspect of the hazard. Surface rupture presents another, particularly for faults like the Frenchman Mountain Fault that are located near developed areas. Surface rupture occurs when displacement along a fault reaches the ground surface, creating visible offsets that can extend for several kilometers or a few miles. In a magnitude 7 earthquake, this displacement could measure several meters or more than 10 feet, depending on the characteristics of the fault and the extent of the rupture. Structures built directly across a fault trace are especially vulnerable, as they may be subjected to differential movement that exceeds their design limits. Even well-engineered buildings are not typically designed to accommodate several meters of permanent ground displacement beneath their foundations. Liquefaction represents an additional concern in parts of the Las Vegas Valley, where groundwater levels are relatively shallow. This process occurs when saturated soils lose their strength during shaking and begin to behave like a liquid. Under these conditions, buildings can tilt, settle unevenly, or even sink partially into the ground. Infrastructure such as buried pipelines and underground utilities is particularly susceptible, as buoyancy forces can cause them to shift or rise. Liquefaction has been observed in numerous earthquakes globally, often resulting in damage that is disproportionate to the overall magnitude of the event. In Las Vegas, areas with fine-grained sediments and higher moisture content would be the most susceptible. Another dimension of seismic impact involves the duration of shaking. In basin environments, seismic waves can become trapped and reverberate within the sedimentary layers, prolonging the shaking beyond what would be expected in more uniform geological settings. This phenomenon, sometimes referred to as basin resonance, can increase the cumulative stress on structures. Buildings that might withstand a short burst of strong shaking could experience greater damage when subjected to prolonged motion. High-rise structures in particular have natural frequencies that may align with the frequencies of amplified seismic waves, leading to resonance effects that intensify their movement. The Las Vegas Strip, characterized by its concentration of large, complex structures, introduces specific considerations in this context. Many of these buildings are engineered with seismic resilience in mind, incorporating design features intended to absorb and dissipate energy. However, the performance of such systems depends on the assumptions used in their design, including the expected intensity and duration of shaking. A magnitude 7 earthquake occurring close to the urban core could exceed some of these assumptions, particularly if local amplification effects are stronger than anticipated. While catastrophic collapse is not the most probable outcome for modern structures built to code, non-structural damage such as failure of interior systems, facade elements, and utilities could still be widespread. Transportation networks would also face significant challenges. Roads and highways crossing areas of differential settlement or surface rupture could become impassable. Bridges, depending on their design and age, might sustain damage that limits their use or requires immediate inspection before reopening. The disruption of transportation routes would complicate emergency response efforts, affecting the ability to deliver aid and coordinate recovery operations. In a city that relies heavily on continuous movement of people and goods, even temporary interruptions could have substantial economic and logistical consequences. Water supply systems are another critical vulnerability. Las Vegas depends on a network of pipelines and distribution infrastructure that transports water from Lake Mead and distributes it throughout the valley. These systems are designed with some degree of flexibility, but strong ground shaking and soil deformation could still lead to leaks or breaks. Loss of water pressure would not only affect daily life, but also hinder firefighting capabilities in the aftermath of an earthquake. Similar concerns apply to wastewater systems, where damage could result in contamination issues that extend beyond the immediate impact zone. Electrical and communication systems would likely experience disruptions as well. Power lines, substations, and communication towers are all sensitive to ground motion and structural damage. While redundancy is built into many of these systems, the scale of a magnitude 7 event could overwhelm backup mechanisms in certain areas. Temporary loss of power and communication would affect not only residents but also emergency services, complicating coordination during a critical period. The economic implications of such an event would extend far beyond physical damage. Las Vegas is a major tourism and entertainment hub, with an economy that depends heavily on continuous operation. Even short-term disruptions could result in significant financial losses. Hotels, casinos, and convention centers would need to assess structural integrity before resuming operations, and any perception of ongoing risk could influence visitor behavior. The ripple effects would be felt across multiple sectors, including transportation, retail, and service industries. Population density adds another layer of complexity. The Las Vegas Valley is home to more than 2 million residents, in addition to the large number of visitors present at any given time. The distribution of people across residential, commercial, and tourist areas means that the impact of an earthquake would vary depending on the time of day and the location of the epicenter. Emergency management strategies must account for these variables, planning for scenarios in which large numbers of people are concentrated in specific areas. Preparedness measures in the region have evolved in response to the recognized seismic hazard. Building codes incorporate requirements for structural integrity under seismic loading, and retrofitting programs have been implemented for certain types of older buildings. Public awareness campaigns emphasize the importance of securing heavy objects, maintaining emergency supplies, and understanding evacuation procedures. These measures are designed to reduce risk, but their effectiveness depends on consistent implementation and public engagement. If you found this breakdown informative and valuable, consider supporting the content by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Tap that hype icon as well to help this video reach a wider audience and keep more in-depth, data-driven reports coming your way.